about, yes, sensory system responsible for somatic sensations, right? I told you that somatic sensation means all of sensations that we have from the body, right? Not from the eyes or ears or nose or the tongue, right? So receptors are all over the body, in the skin, in muscles, and in the bone, and also joints, right? So somatic sensations may be actually mechanoreceptive, thermoreceptive, or chemo, yeah, actually, yeah, thermoreceptive, mechanoreceptive, and not chemoreceptive. I told you nociceptive, right? Nociceptive, thermoreceptive, and mechanoreceptive. And I told you that we have two classifications, right? The second type of classification is exteroceptive, proprioceptive, interoceptive or visceroceptive, and deep sensations. And you remember that we had 6 receptors in the skin responsible for touch, pressure, vibration, right? And 5 of these receptors are connected to the spinal cord by way of A beta fibers, right? Mycin, Pacinium, Ruffinium. Hair receptors, right? And Merkel discs. So these are connected to the spinal cord by way of A beta fibers. And free nerve endings are connected to the spinal cord by way of C type or A delta type. And you also remember that when these signals, signals from these receptors, come to the spinal cord, they have 2 ways for going up to the brain, right? So there are 2 ways, 2 tracks. The first one is dorsal column medial lemniscal system, DCMM, right? The first one. And the second one is anterolateral system. And you also should remember that dorsal columns are located here at the posterior side of the spinal cord, so toward the back, right? But this one, anterolateral, and so we have another one here, right, are located to the lateral side and partly to the anterior side, right? So we have 2 parts in the spinal cord for transmission of signals to the brain, right? Now, remember that we had A beta fibers that come to the spinal cord and they make 2 branches, a medial branch and the lateral branch, right? The lateral one stops here, so it makes synapses here in the spinal cord. So it can activate other neurons. You can see several other neurons that are located here, and they are activated by the lateral branch of the A beta fiber. But the medial branch enters the dorsal column on the same side. So we have 2 dorsal columns, right? A beta fibers from each side enters actually the dorsal column on the same side, right? And they go up. But anterolateral system is different. Actually, fibers come to here, to this part of the spinal cord. They make synapses with other neurons. And these neurons go to the opposite side and enter the anterolateral system on the opposite side. And then from here, they go up to the brain, right? So now, in this session, I will talk about these pathways, right? So let's see the details, the anatomical details of these pathways. So remember that DCML system was responsible for transmission of precise senses like touch, position, vibration, right? Movement against the skin. So these are precise types of actually sensations. But we have another one, right? Anterolateral system, which transmits pain, temperature, age, tickle, cool, touch, foot pressure, and also sexual sensation. So these sensations are not so precise. I mean, temperature is something vague. So we can only actually say that this is hot or this is cold, okay? So maybe if there is sharp differences between two temperatures, we can differentiate between them. But we cannot differentiate between minute gradation of the temperature. For example, we cannot differentiate between 37 degrees Celsius and 36 degrees Celsius, right? But pressure is something different, hot is something different. We can differentiate it actually exactly, right? So, sensations that are very precise are transmitted in the DCMR system. Sensations that are vague and dull, right, are transmitted in the atrolateral system. So now, in this image, we can see light touch. Okay? So, let's start from here. So, when we have stimulation in these healing tones, so some receptors are activated. Imagine that myoclonic corpuscles and, let's say, Merkel discs that are very sensitive are activated, right? So action potential is made and is conveyed through the nerves to the spinal cord. So again, remember that we have dermatomes, right? For example, the anterior side of the leg is innervated by actually nerves from lumbar sections, right? But the posterior side of the leg is innervated by spinal nerves that originate from sacral regions, right? So they go to the lumbar part, right? When they go to now, and one more thing. The cell body of this receptor is located in the dorsal root ganglion, right? So we have a cell here in the dorsal root ganglion. It has two branches. One long branch that goes to the toes, and one smaller branch that goes to the spinal cord, right? Actually, this one is also long because it goes to the spinal cord and then goes off to the medulla, right? So the cell body is in the DRG. Now, it enters the spinal cord. Remember that it has two branches, medial and lateral. The lateral one stops here, but it's not shown here because we are focusing on the medial one, right? The medial one enters the dorsal column, I told you, on the same side. So we have two dorsal columns, right? So this spider enters the dorsal column on the same side of the touch, right? Then it goes up. So it goes through lumbar sections, thoracic sections, cervical sections, right? Then it reaches medulla in the brain. So medulla is here, right? So the blue fiber comes in the medulla and makes synapses with another neuron. Right? So this is the second neuron. The first one is here in the DRG, and the second one is here in the medulla. So the nucleus, which includes this neuron, is called dorsal column nucleus. So dorsal column, right, has a nucleus. Where it's located? Medulla. Right? So it enters the medulla and it stops here and activate neurons in the medulla, the dorsal column nuclei, right? So the second neuron starts from here, goes to the opposite side, and then goes off in the brain, right? So it should pass through medulla, pons, midbrain, right? So it passes these three parts and reaches thalamus. Thalamus is located in the forebrain, right, in diencephalon. So in area called diencephalon. So it goes through medulla, pons, midbrain, reaches thalamus. In the thalamus, we have the third nucleus or third neuron, right? The third neuron starts from here and goes to cortex, right? So how many neurons do we have here? 3 first one is in the DRG, the second one in the dorsal column nuclei of the medulla, third one in pons. Right? Third neuron goes up to the cortex. So we have 3 neurons from toes to the brain. And they send information from Merkel disc, Meissner corpuscles, Ruffinian, Pacinian, hair receptors, free nerve endings, all they go to the cortex, right? So now let's see some more details. So before that, let's see also fibers that originate from the hands, right? So on the same side. So stimulation of fingers activate the same receptors, right? So the cell body is located in the DRG again, and they go to the dorsal column, right? On the same side. And they go up. So they go up until they reach dorsal column in the middle. So the red one also crosses the midline, so it goes to the opposite side and goes up through the pons midbrain and reaches the thalamus. Then from here they go to cortex. So again we have 3 neurons. DRG neuron, dorsal column nuclei neuron, thalamus neuron. They go to cortex, right? But let's have a look here. So you can see that dorsal column on each side has 2 parts, right? The first one, which is located close to the midline, is called fasciculus gracilis. Fasciculus gracilis. The other one, which is located laterally, is called fasciculus cuneatus, right? So they go up and reach the medulla, and in the medulla we have 2 nuclei, gracile nucleus, cuneate nucleus, right? So, and here you can see that fibers that originate from the toes enter the gracile one, but fibers that originate from the hands enter the cuneate one, right? So they go up and end in gracile nucleus, cuneate nucleus, right? So we have 2 nuclei in the medulla related to the dorsal column. They include gracile and cuneate. The gracile one collects information from lower part of the body, right? Cuneate collects information about, from upper part of the body. So where is the boundary? So consider the navel, okay, umbilicus. So below the umbilicus is lower part, above that is upper part. And navel actually is located to, physiologically, is related to thoracic segment 6. Right? So we have 12 thoracic segments. The sixth one is the middle one, right? So below the navel, send the information to segments below the T6. Above the navel, sends the information to segments above the T6. Got this? Okay. So again, both of these cross the midline, enter the actually brainstem. In the brainstem, we have a tract for that is called medial lemniscus, right? So in the spinal cord, fibers travel through dorsal columns, but in medulla, pons, and midbrain, they go through medial lemniscus, right? So that's why we call this dorsal column, medial lemniscus, DC and L, right? So DCML stands for dorsal column medial lemniscal system. Dorsal column is located in the spinal cord. Medial lemniscus is located in the brain. Dorsal column on each side is connected to the medial lemniscus on the opposite side. right? So when these fibers enter the thalamus, they go to nucleus VPN, ventral posterior nucleus, right? Ventral posterior nucleus. In Guyton book, it's mentioned ventrobasal complex. So ventrobasal complex is another name for ventral posterior nucleus. In anatomy, we usually use VPN, ventral posterior nucleus. But Guyton book mentioned ventrobasal complex. Ignore this, right? And remember VPN, ventral posterior nucleus. So in the thalamus, all fibers from the body, right, that actually convey information about touch, vibration, and pressure enter the ventral posterior nucleus. From here, neurons go to the cortex. But one thing more, we are talking about the body, okay? So information from the face are different. So they don't go to the spinal cord. They go directly to the brain. How? Because they are connected through cranial nerves, not through spinal nerves. So Meissner corpuscles, Pacinian corpuscles, Merkel disc, all receptors that are located in the skin of the face are connected to the brainstem through cranial nerves, not through spinal nerves. Which cranial nerve? Facial nerve and trigeminal nerve. Good. Right? So facial nerve and trigeminal nerve actually convey messages from these receptors to the brainstem. When they go to the brainstem, they enter medial lemniscus. Right? So these fibers join other fibers originated from the body, travel through this dorsal column, and then enter the medial lemniscus. Right? So those fibers are already there. Fibers from the face join these fibers. Right? But now let me mention another thing. Orientation. I told you before that orientation in the DCML system is high, but orientation in the anterolateral system is low. Right? So what do I mean? So remember that fibers from the toes enter the gracile. Fibers from the fingers enter the humate fasciculus. Right? So if we have a section from a cervical segment, right? So imagine that you cut this spinal cord at the same cervical level. So what do we have in a dorsal column? We have fibers that enters from the toes. We have fibers that enter from the knees, fibers from the thigh, fibers from the hip, fibers from the stomach, right, belly, fibers from the chest, right, fibers from the arms, fibers from the fingers. So we start from the bottom to the top, right? So fibers that enter from the toe goes to a location very close to the midline. Then fibers that originate from the ankle goes to a level a little lateral to the first one, right? Fibers that originate from the knee enter the dorsal column, enter the gracile one, but they are located more lateral, right? So if you can see there, the cervical column, right? Fibers that are very close to the midline originated from the toes. When we go a little laterally, fibers originated from the knee. When we go a little more laterally, fibers are coming from the thigh, right? So as we go up, fibers in the dorsal column goes laterally and laterally, right? So we have a specific orientation of fibers located in the dorsal column. And this orientation is reversed when we go to medial lemniscus. right? So again, let's see here, fibers cross the midline and go to the opposite side, right? When they go to the opposite side, orientation is reversed. So here, you can see that the blue one is medially, the red one, originated from the hand, is located laterally, right? But here in the medial lemniscus, orientation is changed. Fibers that originated from the fingers are located medially, fibers from the leg are located laterally, right? They go to thalamus. From thalamus to cortex, again orientation changes. Fibers from the leg goes to the medial side, right? Similar to this spinal cord. Fibers from the hand goes to laterals, right? Got this? One thing more, only one thing more. So I told you that fibers from the face enter directly the medial lemniscus. When they come here in the medial lemniscus, they are located more medially. Right? So in the spinal cord, we don't have any fiber from the face. But here we have fibers from the face, right? So we have leg, arm, face. Not shown here actually, but it's located most medially. Right? When they go to the thalamus, in the thalamus again, VPN has two parts, ventral posterior lateral, ventral posterior medial. Fibers from all over the body go to ventral posterior lateral, right? But fibers only from the face go to ventral posterior medial. Got this? This is the details about the dorsal column medial lemniscal system, right? So you should know everything about this. You should know the neurons, I mean the location of the neurons. So we have DRG, dorsal column nuclei, VPN of thalamus. You should know orientation, right? You should know which fasciculus actually contain which fiber, right? You should know the location where we have the cross, right? And you should know where they go in the cortex, right? Actually, I will talk about this more in other slides, right? So, now let's see anterolateral system. I told you that anterolateral system is more important for transmission of temperature, pain, itch, teacup, right? So in this example, we have temperature or maybe pain, right? So they are the same actually. So if we have thermal stimulation in the skin, in toes, they activate some free nerve endings, right? These free nerve endings are connected to the spinal cord by way of A delta fibers and C fibers, not A beta fibers. So the cell body is located again in DRG. So all sensory fibers originated from the body have their somas in DRG. No matter they come from the skin or the bone or the muscles or the internal organs. All of them have their cell bodies in DRG, dorsal root ganglion. So the fiber enters the spinal cord, but here it's different from the DCML system. In the DCML system, the fiber directly enters dorsal column without synapse, without interruption. But here we have stop, we have synapse, right? So the first neuron is in the DRG, but the second neuron is in the spinal cord, not in the medulla, right? So the second neuron originates from the spinal cord, the axon goes to the opposite side, enter the anterolateral system, and then it goes up. Again, stimulation from the skin of the fingers. Activate the RG neurons. They enter the spinal cord. Activate spinal neurons. Then go to the opposite side, enter the anterolateral system, and then go up. So they go up, they reach medulla, pons, and midbrain. When they come here, they don't stop here, right? They go directly to thalamus. Again, ventral posterior nucleus. Ventral posterior nucleus. From VPN, fibers go to cortex. So the first neuron is in the DRG, the second neuron is in the spinal cord, the third neuron is in the thalamus. Got this? But one thing more. The spinal neuron that crosses the midline and go up and reaches the medulla, pons, and mesencephalon have some collaterals. So the main branch goes directly to the thalamus. But the lateral branches, right, enter the medulla, pons, and midbrain and make connections with neurons that are located here in the brainstem, right? So the cell body is in the spinal cord, the main branch goes to thalamus, but lateral branch, side branches enter the medulla, pons, and midbrain. Got this? Again, they go to thalamus and cortex. So let's mention one difference between the orientation of the DCML system and orientation of the anterolateral system. Remember that in the DCML system, lower part of the body is represented medially, upper part of the body is represented laterally. What about anterolateral system? Yeah, you can see that fibers from the lower part of the body are located laterally, but fibers from the upper part of the body are located medially, right? But I told you before that orientation in the anterolateral system is not so precise. So generally we can say this, lateral medial. But fibers actually are intermixed and we cannot differentiate between them. But in the DCML system, orientation is very precise. Right? Okay. Any questions so far? Everything is clear? Okay. Now you should tell me. If we consider a cervical section, right? If we look into a dorsal column, right? Fibers in the dorsal column are originated from which side? Same side or the opposite side? Same side, right? So, in the DCML system, in the dorsal column, fibers originated from the same side, right? But if we have the same look at cervical columns, cervical segments in the anterolateral system. So instead of looking at this, let's see this. Okay? Fibers that are here originated from the opposite side of the body. Right? Why? Because of this cross. Right? So if we have any damage in the spinal cord, right? Imagine that we have damage in the spinal cord on the right side. In the anterolateral system, we'll see a problem in sensation on the opposite side, because fibers that are here are coming from the opposite side, right? But in the dorsal column, we will see a problem on the same side, because fibers are coming from sense. So we can expect that this patient will have a problem sensing touch on the same leg, for example, but problem sensing pain on the opposite leg. So if we, for example, examine the patient, right? So ask them to close their eyes and touch them. Okay, I told you that damage on the right side, right? So they cannot understand, they cannot feel touch on the same leg. But if you have a pinprick, they can feel it, they can feel the pain, right? But if you examine the same on the opposite leg, they can understand, they can feel the touch, but they cannot understand pinprick. Got this? So this is important for us, right? So in examination, we can find the location of the damage if we know exact anatomy of these fibers. Got this? Okay, any question? No? No question? So, I told you before that the anterolateral system is also called spinothalamic. So we have spinothalamic tract here, right? So actually, this is the midbrain, mesencephalon, right? So medial lemniscus is here, spinothalamic tract is here. Both of them go to thalamus. So both DCML system and anterolateral system end in ventral posterior nucleus of thalamus. From here they go to cortex. So lower part goes to actually medial side. So if we consider the brain like this, we have two hemispheres, right? They are attached together. So here is the midline and here is the lateral side, right? So we have midline here, so this is the medial side. So this side is lateral, right? Fibers from the lower part of the body go to medial side. Fibers from the upper side of the body and the face go to laterals. Okay? So this is the orientation and it's very important for us. Okay. Where this part of the cortex is located? Here. Okay? So we know that we have frontal lobe, yeah, occipital lobe, parietal lobe, temporal, right? So two very important markers are central fissure or central sulcus, which divides frontal lobe from actually parietal lobe, but Sylvian fissure, which is located between the frontal and parietal and temporal, right? So, if we consider this central fissure, posterior side is the parietal lobe. In the anterior side of the posterior lobe, or in the anterior side of the parietal lobe, we have an area marked with blue called somatosensory area 1. So, somatosensory area 1 is located in the parietal lobe, in the anterior side of the parietal lobe, just behind the central fissure, right? And actually, it has a fold like this, right? So it has a fold, which is called gyrus. So this fold is called gyrus. So we have post-central gyrus. So central fissure is here. We have post-central gyrus here, right? Post-central gyrus. In the post-central gyrus, we have somatosensory area 1. Next to that, we have another area, somatosensory area 2. And we have also two areas here, here and here, right? So we call them somatosensory associational areas. Somatosensory association areas. So 3 regions in the cortex responsible for somatic sensations include somatosensory area 1, somatosensory area 2, somatosensory associational areas. Right? So now let's see this one. This is a histological map of the brain. Okay? Actually devised by a scientist called Brodmann. Right? So Brodmann was a scientist, was a histologist that divided the cortex into 52 areas. Right? So, for example, area 1 is here, area 2 here, area 3, area 4. So area 4 is here, in the frontal lobe. But here, somatosensory area 1 include Brodmann area 1, 2, 3. So, Brodmann area 1, 2, 3 collectively are somatosensory area 1. Got this? And I told you that we have two areas called somatosensory associational areas. So they are located here. Area 5 and area 7. So these two, so area 5 and area 7 are called somatosensory associations. So now let's focus on somatosensory area 1. This one. So you can see that you have the top of the brain, which is very close to the midline, right? And you have the lateral side, I told you. Medial one, lateral. So on the medial side, we have thigh, then we have thorax, neck, shoulder, head, hand, finger, tongue, and intra-abdominal structures. Right? So what this means? For example, if we touch the neck, right, we can feel it. So where in the brain we can feel this touch? This touch on the opposite side. So I touch the left side, right? This information goes to the opposite side, right? Reach the somatosensory area 1. In somatosensory area 1, we have a sub-region for neck, right? If we stimulate here, not here, then the location changes, location of activation, right? So information goes to the opposite side of the brain. In the brain, they go to an area related to face, actually, not sure, yeah, here, face, right? So now let's see this figure. Okay, you can see half of the brain here, and actually from the middle one, from the middle side to lateral side, right? So we have genital areas, toes, ankle, leg, thigh, right? Strong. Then we have hand and fingers. We have face and mouth, right? Tongue, and I told you intra-abdominal, right? Any sensation in the face on the opposite side activate neurons in the cortex, right? So when neurons in this area are activated, this means there is something stimulating the face. So we feel touch in the face. Got this? So one thing which is important here is that the size of these body areas are not proportional. Right? So in the cortex, we have an area from here to here related to face, an area from here to here related to the hand and fingers, but for example, an area from here to here for all other parts of the body.
Depends on how much we use the organ, right? It depends on how much we use the organ, the stimulation.
Yeah, actually it depends on, not the size of the body part. For example, we have a very large leg in the body, but the cortical area for leg is very small. It depends on the number of receptors that we have in that part of the body. So in the leg, we have, for example, we may have 100 receptors, okay? Only actually an imaginary number, actually. So imagine that we have 100 receptors scattered in the leg, but we may have, for example, 1,000 receptors only in fingers. Okay? So this means the density of receptors in the skin of the fingers is very high, but the density of the receptors in other part is low. So relatively, okay? So the brain responsible for sensations from the leg is very small, but the cortical area responsible for face and the finger is very large. So that's why we use actually fingers for touch, right? So we don't use, for example, our legs for touch, or we don't use our back for touch, okay? So we use fingers. So that's why all receptors, or most of the receptors, are confined in the fingertips, okay? Because we usually use fingers for touch, not any other part of the body. But what about face? Why should we have a lot of fibers from the face, or a lot of receptors in the face? Do we use the face for touch? No, actually. For expression of, actually expression is a motor action, right? But we need them. I mean, we need sensation in order to guide actions, right? So that's why we have a lot of receptors in the lips, because we use the lips for speaking, for speech, right? So we need precise control over the muscles of the lips, right? And for this precise control, we need a lot of information, a lot of sensory information. These sensory information are collected in the brain, then they go to the motor areas of the brain, and the motor area can use this information for precise, actually, planning of movements in the lips, right? So you may have the experience of actually anaphysizing the fibers in the mouth when you go to the dentist, right? So after you come out of the dentist, you feel something wrong in your face. You think that your lips actually dropped down, maybe. You think that when you talk, they are not in the right place, right? So why? Actually, there is no problem with movements of the lips and face, but you feel something wrong because the sensory part is blocked. And this sensory part cannot be used for precise movement of the lips, right? So always the sensory information and motor information should be coordinately matched with each other in the brain, right? So for this reason, we should have a very large area related to the face, because the face is used for speech, right? Which is a very important and complex type of movement. Any question here? No? Okay. Which of the following part of the body is represented most medially in the brain? A, face. B, toes. C, fingers. D, shoulder. Toes. Most medial. So, touch from the gums, right, is represented in A, medial side of the somatosensory area 1, B, top region of the somatosensory area 1, C, medial part, D, medial part, lateral part. So, medial, top, middle, lateral. Teeth, gums, present another? So, which of the following is part of the somatosensory area of 1, is not part of the somatosensory area of 1? A, Brodmann area of 1, B, Brodmann area 2, C, Brodmann area 3, 4, Brodmann area 4, 4. 4 is not part of the somatosensory area of 1. 4 is here, but this one is somatosensory area 1, that includes Brodmann area 1, 2, and 3. Which of the following is not a sensory part of the brain? I mean, it's somatosensory part of the brain. A, Brodmann area 1 and 2. B, Brodmann area 2 and 3. C, Brodmann area 4 and 6. D, Brodmann area 5 and 7. 4 and 6. 4 and 6 are here. 5 and 7 are here, part of the association areas. Got this? Okay. Which part of the body has the largest orientation in the cortex? A, toes. B, thighs. C, face. D, intra-abdominal organs. Face has the largest part. If in the question you have fingers and hand, that can also be a answer, right? So because hand and fingers are also very large.
Which one's larger? Which one's larger?
Yeah, the larger is the face. Right? Okay. So do we have any question? Everything is okay? So how much time do we have? You want to have a break for 5 minutes? After that, are you done?